So yeah, I'm going to talk about social value, which is quite a very, very coming area. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you can. Okay, right. So it's a really very difficult area to get your brain around. So I think I spend a lot of my time on industry bodies talking about social value, and I think the main thing is to sort of confirm what people find, which is that it is a very confusing and emerging area, but it's an area with so much potential, I think, to transform actually the construction industry entirely, I would say. And indeed everything. I mean, so the Social Value Act 2012 came in, led by actually Conservative Party. And I don't think they realised, or maybe they did, the legs that it would grow in terms of procurement and the way things are being delivered across a whole load of different fields. All right. So I wrote a book. How I got into this area is I wrote a book. Oh, God, you can see what it's like in my area. I wrote a book called Why Architects Matter, because architects are typically so bad at evidencing the value of what they do, particularly with data. And architects in particular, though I think it's a thing right across the whole construction industry, really don't like the dragon of measurement culture. They don't like to be measured. They don't like to see themselves as an increment of economic gain or whatever. But I think in this data-driven world that we're in, we have to face this head on, this whole issue, to make the best of it, particularly since our activities are being written into algorithms, you know, really opaque algorithms that we just don't know what they're going to be doing and what they're going to be doing in the future. So we've got to get a handle on all of that. And we published this special edition of Architectural Design on social value in architecture, which gave lots of nice case studies, both from the UK, but right across the globe, because it's a very growing area. I would say particularly in Australia, it's huge. So social value in the context of built environment, a little tiny whip through of context. As you're probably aware, there's been a kind of argy-bargy, people trying to take control of what social value is. And the UK Green Building Council did a great job in developing this framework for defining social value. I see social value as being part of the sustainability triple, the bottom line of social, economic and environmental. And somehow with this diagram, they managed to combine that with Kate Raworth's donut economics, which I thought was quite an achievement personally. But I always like to see social as part of the triple bottom line, so integral with it. But you have to try and distill it out from the other environmental and economic value in order to take it seriously. Environmental and economic value, we've got much more clarity about what the indicators for those might be. And obviously, the triple bottom line, economic, social and environmental, they're at the bottom of the national planning policy framework. Although I regret to say there doesn't seem to be any discussion of social value in this whole future of planning, all these future of planning documents that seem to be coming through. Don't understand that. And of course, the triple bottom line is at the bottom of the Treasury Green Book, and how they do their cost benefit analysis for spending public money. And what's been, in my book, Why Architects Matter, I argue that the future of construction procurement is going to be values or outcomes-based procurement, accompanied by integrated project insurance. And Anne Bentley, with her amazing report, Procuring for Value, really made the case for outcome-based procurement. Some of the most enlightened clients are starting to use it. I'm told Google used it, for example, and whereby the client says this project has got to deliver this much of XYZ kinds of value, and then the whole team work together to deliver it. And you're hearing about it more and more happening. And actually, it's fundamental to the Construction Innovation Hub value tool, which is just being trialed at the moment. And if you're not aware of it, you really need to get familiar with it, because I think it's going to be very, very transformational to the whole procurement scene. So they've had a lot of money to develop a digital tool, and Bentley leading it, to help clients develop outcomes-based procurement. Now, it makes me a bit sad that they're not using the triple bottom line for sustainability. And we did a lot of arguing for that because they were very obsessed with the capitals approach. But we got it down to 4, and you can sort of see that these capitals could translate to social, economic, and environmental. But the essence of the tool is like a graphic equalizer. The client can say, I want this much of this kind of value and that much of that kind of value going forward. And I think so. This is going to put the onus on the construction team and built environment professionals to be doing post-occupancy evaluation and gathering data on the impact of their work. At the moment, a lot of time buildings are procured not on the basis of past performance, but I think that is set to change. And I spent a lot of time when I was RIBA Vice President for research in really trying to promote post-occupancy evaluation. It's the absolute first step in getting our data ducks in order. So Anglia Water is a client that does outcomes-based procurement. It procures things on the basis of outcomes for the customers and for the environment. There's one example, and there are many more. And one of the things I'm very concerned about is there's a lot of talk about digital twins, the digital doppelgangers, digital models of future places, towns, and cities that will be modeled virtually before we actually build them. And it would be very scary if the social wasn't somehow incorporated in those models. So we came up with a tentative sort of definition of ways in which buildings can generate social value. There's one, the obvious one, jobs and apprenticeships. I'm sure you're all dead familiar with that. That tends to work really badly for architects who have year-out students and things that aren't called apprenticeships. In fact, the whole procurement system at the moment seems to be skewed very much towards infrastructure and large construction companies. And this is one of our strands of work, really, trying to change the way that terminology of social value is happening in procurement. Okay, so jobs and apprenticeships, dodgy, but very tick box. The well-being generated by design, this has been my focus. The building itself can make all sorts of well-being outcomes. The learning developed through construction. Now, there's more and more people who are designing, building with people who've never built anything before. So, for example, Invisible Studio working at Weston Burt Arboretum with the local FE college, people who've never built anything built a building together for themselves. There's one in Cardiff where I live. Designing with the community, then there's the impact of participatory consultation and so on. And then there's building with local materials. So that's using local services and using local materials. I reckon that can be collected very soon on a BIM model with great ease. And then there are other bits of social value about the performance of your own organization, you know, whether you're using fair trade tea bags or whatever, those sort of, or whether you go and do volunteering in schools. I haven't really covered that there, but those are also important dimensions of the whole thing. So social value toolkit for architecture was, it was done, we made it with a bunch of architectural practitioners. We have a group called the Research Practice Leads, have about 40 architecture practices. They're not all architects, the people on it, but the idea, we get together and discuss good practice in the research in practice. And we did a task and finish group on social value, because the people in the group were wasting so much time scratching their head on how to do their social value bids for procurement, which I'm sure you will know is a real shenanigans. And indeed, I heard tales of super social value experts being brought in to help people with the procurement, filling in their procurement social value statements, and actually doing even worse as a result of having social value experts in on the thing. So there's a whole world with that. But the aim of this was to make a practical, simple toolkit for evidencing and measuring the social value of good design, because the value of design is not being part of the social value agenda. To understand the impact of design through qualitative and quantitative post-occupancy evaluation, and to help decision makers include the social value of design in policy and procurement. And I would say that we've been quite successful in this, because since doing the social value toolkit for architecture, people have had to think about the social value of design where they hadn't been thinking about it before. So we kicked off with a sort of workshop at HCA Design LLP. We had experts in there from the New Economics Foundation, from Arup, Hatch Regeneris, place like that. And we started a program of work, developing questions. We did a literature review of wellbeing literature, all these kinds of things. Use grey literature, they use different terminology for what is healthy and well-being. I mean, I have to admit that I will fairly interchangeably talk about quality of life, well-being, and social value. Social value is something that is a word that leaves everyone cold. They don't really understand what it is. Now, why is it? Oh, there we are. So you don't have to read this, but suffice to say, tried to make to compare all the terminology and categorize them, and to come up with headline outcomes about the social value design, about positive emotions, connecting, freedom and flexibility, and participation, if relevant. We were thinking mainly about housing. These are very, very close to the New Economics Foundation's 5 Ways to Wellbeing, which I think is an excellent way of gauging well-being. Anyway, we got these outcomes, and we worked with practitioners to develop sub-questions, post-occupancy questions that we could ask people about these things. And then we launched a pilot with various architectural practices. So samples of the questions we came up with, this is one under the heading of connecting. My neighborhood gives me opportunity to stop and talk with people regularly. And then you've got this Likert scale, strongly agree to disagree. So that can become a kind of multiplier to show how strong the feeling is. So we tested out these post-occupancy questions. They look very simple, but I can't tell you how much work went into them. The idea is that you could, in an ideal world, you have a baseline before the building's built, or at the very start, you do this exercise, you find out the social value levels, and then after, say, 4 years, you do it again. And again and again. But if you don't have the luxury of a baseline, you can put in a multiplier or ask a question about how much the new building has influenced this outcome. So you can use that as a multiplier as well. So it's published by the RIBA. It includes that library of questions, and it includes these things, the proxies for the monetization for design. So social return on investment is quite a pucker way of monetizing social value outcomes. Things like levels of how much it costs UK PLC for one depressed person per year. And there are various systems of SROI. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the TOMS framework, which is very popular with local authorities. There's HACT, which is more like related to housing and design. And there are other ones, and the people in them tend to share their proxies quite a lot. But there is a bit of a competition going ahead on, which system will dominate at the moment. But we wanted to get across the message to architects in particular that actually you could monetize. Architects are very flawed by having to monetize things. I personally, the more I'm into this, the less I think you should monetize. But if you have to monetize, you could monetize the social value outcomes of your building. And we've given some guidance on how to do that. And we also did guidance on ethical good practice for surveys, because a lot of practitioners have never been trained to do surveys properly, although that's something we do at the University of Reading School of Architecture as a matter of course. Okay, so that's all social value, but I don't think social value I think it's fairly meaningless unless we know where it happens. So I'm arguing for the spatial dimension of social value. So we did this project called Mapping Social Value, and we did it on an estate in Reading, where we did a lot of community workshops, getting people to write on maps, putting stickers, and we developed these community maps, which we tested them back on communities, see if they liked them, and eventually ended up with these layered maps, which related to our social value indicators, which then became what we call these happy maps of this estate. Now, these happy maps have had quite a lot of policy and industry interest, have attracted quite a lot of interest, because you could start, so for example, in this area, they shut down the local swimming pool while we were doing it. We could have made the case showing the impact on the map of the shutting down of the swimming pool if we had been asked to do so, if the council hadn't flogged the swimming pool so fast that nobody could get an objection in time. But you start seeing the potential of these kind of mapping things. So we've written a report. So I wanted to draw attention to this diagram here on the right, which is like multi-layered mapping. So we've got the multi-layered mapping of the social value, but the future of this is a multi-layered mapping of social value, but also aggregating it with other what's known passive data sets like indices of deprivation, mortality rates, house prices, you name it, the things that are quite readily available off the shelf. And increasingly places like, for example, Greater Manchester have an enormous, you can go to their website and they have all these layered data sets there at the ready, although they haven't quite yet worked out what to do with them, and we're working with them on that. So we did the referee journal on this as a paper on that. So this project has led to another one working with Stantec, a very big infrastructure planning and land use decision-making company. We've got a knowledge transfer partnership, which is one way of so knowledge transfer partnership, I'll just plug it here. If you stump up half the cash, the Innovate UK will pay the other half, and the only requirement of a knowledge transfer partnership is to give you commercial benefit for your company. So it's really worthwhile doing them. You can do them with any university. So we've got one with Stantec, and our aim here is to make those handmade digital maps that we did at Reading to help to make them digital, GIS based, and with AI to translate what the people felt about their places into the actual mapping system. And our sites are set on the local planning stage, right at the very beginning of the development process, because local development planning happens without, it comes with sustainability assessment and economic assessment. There is no real assessment of the social in there. And and I know that to my cost in my own area. That's why I've got a bin lorry outside, because no one's thought about the social impact of throwing businesses next door to my house. So I digress. But anyway, it's really, we're working on that early area, and we're working with developers and starting to get a sense of how developers are doing some quite interesting things around consultation at that argy-bargy level of local development planning and drawing red lines around bits of land and all of that stuff. And this project, we've just been given nearly £1 million for another project, which is on community consultation for quality of life. This is with the Quality of Life Foundation and the digital consultation platform Commonplace. We're doing it in Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England, in Reading. We're going to be developing best practice for digital consultation and for face-to-face, and to see how they interface together. This is going to be map-based. It's going to be around the Mesa maps. And the aim ultimately, we would hope, would be someday that we might end up with social value maps, a patchwork of social maps, value maps for the whole of the UK, which, so rather than doing very piecemeal and perfunctory community consultation the way it happens at the moment, you could do consultations that had a joined up effort, and that each consultation brought new people into the fold, in a sense, to do the consultation. And also you could start seeing how one consultation built on another, on another, and another. So we're going to be doing that over the next 30 months. So I just want to stress that the future of planning is under discussion in Britain, but in England, in England, they're wanting to go towards this coded system of planning. And I believe that social value needs to be coded into plans going forward. But Scotland has already got a digital planning strategy whereby large-scale planning tallies up with hyper-local planning. Well, hasn't really, they've got a strategy for it. And I think this is the way everything's going, from the hyper-local to the local planning, with social value right in there as one of those maps. So in conclusion, the Rise of Social Value agenda is a really important opportunity to make better building and places. Procurement needs to change to ensure that it's consistent and fair and gives adequate consideration to the full range of social value contributions across the built environment. There's enormous opportunity in here for developing things like social value bonds and drumming up funding for projects, especially as things are moving towards ethical investment. And if you're interested in the stuff the work that the Good Economy has been doing, pension pots are going to start being brought back into England, and people are going to be looking for ways to invest locally with those pension pots, locally and ethically. So design value, good design, I argue, is a triple bottom line of sustainability, economic, social, environmental value. And I think this should be the same as beauty, as I'm sure you're aware that the MHCLG's whole thing about beauty going on. What is beauty? I think it's the triple bottom line of sustainability. Well, not just I've done a lot of research on it with others. And planning policy and the new construction innovation hub tool and digital technology seem to fall in line around a similar in understanding of social value. But post-occupancy evaluation will be absolutely key. So if you're not doing any post-occupancy evaluation, even if it's as simple as just like, we did up a coffee shop, they sold that many coffees before and that many after, you really need to get started on that. And you can get R&D tax credits for that kind of work generally. And we're entering into an era of value-based, map-based, code-based, adaptive planning, which needs to have constant input from the community if it's just to be both inclusive and democratic. So that's a quick whip round of social value. This is all the people that were all involved in making the toolkit. So many thanks for your attention.